Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and today we're bringing back something I haven't done in a while, Superstar Spotlight. Today we're going to be talking about the life and career of one Steve Blackman, born September the 28th, 1963 in Annville, Pennsylvania, which, by the way, he was billed as being from. Stands 6'2", 245 pounds, a pure martial artist at heart, and a no-nonsense, hard-hitting, legit tough guy at best. So Steve Blackman, he's actually been involved in the wrestling business more than we're led on to believe, because he debuted for the World Wrestling Federation in 1986 as an amateur wrestler, sort of, enhancement talent, what they would call developmental today, I guess. No, not even developmental. That's different, but enhancement talent to put over the other guys, make them look stronger. He took on the likes of David Sammartino, C.V. Affi, Haku, Tama, and Boris Zhukov, to name a few. So he was actually being groomed around that time in training to be a main roster superstar, bigger than what the amateurs were at the time. However, when he was on a South African tour with World Wrestling Federation, he unfortunately contracted malaria and dysentery, rendering him bedridden for 2 years. My God. We knew it was bad when we heard about those on the Oregon Trail way back when, but, 1989, it was still affecting people negatively. It took him a long time to recover, needless to say. Now, during that time, he received a lot of physical therapy to regain his strength because, he was bedridden and, couldn't do anything physically, so he needed something to improve his mobility. And in so doing, that time he actually trained in a martial arts form called Eskrima, which comes from the Philippines. So he had the Filipino martial arts training, as well as training in Taekwondo, which is probably a more standard, popular style, if you will. I'm not a martial artist, but I know he's a third-degree black belt, and that's the highest ranking you can receive. So good for Steve. And that actually worked out for the best because he was able to incorporate all that training into his new character by the time he arrived back in the World Wrestling Federation, which wouldn't be until late 1997. It was Brian Pillman and Owen Hart whom he contacted in order to get back in the business, plus Jim Cornette helped pull a few strings. They helped Blackman gain full employment for the company. So he debuted on the November 3rd, 1997 episode of Raw is War. He replaced the Patriot on Team USA at Survivor Series 97 the following week. So the Patriot, he was being groomed to be a world title contender at the very dawn of the Attitude Era. Feuded against Bret Hart, and of course lost him at Ground Zero in Your House. Del Wilkes, he was an All-American, Patriot, as the namesake is, a masked superstar, exuding his All-American status, his gimmick. And he'd come to the ring with the flag, but by that point, the whole, pro-American wrestler, babyface good guy stuff was totally passé. It was gone. So we don't need another Hulk Hogan or Lex Luger. So the Patriot actually suffered some injury to his shoulder or forearm, I forget, which actually ended his career, I believe. No, it didn't end his career, but, it's definitely took years off his life. And, it never got better. It never healed to the point where he was never able to come back to the WWF full time. So once the Patriot was out with injury, he was done. Here, enter Steve Blackman. He was on a very weak Team USA, if I may say so myself. Captained by Vader, they had Marvelous Mark Merrow and Goldust, who was a tweener at this point in time. In real life, he'd separated from Marlena, Terry Runnels, and sort of incorporated that into the storyline. Apparently, he punched a hole in the wall, and that's why he had a cast on during the Survivor Series. But of course, we know Goldust didn't do shit in that match. That led to the heel turn and feuding with Vader subsequently. Now, their opponents were Team Canada, whom they lost to, captained by the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, alongside Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Doug Furness, and Philip LaFawn. Oh my God, all 4 guys on Team Canada are dead. Vader's dead on Team USA, and everyone else is still alive. Oh my God, 3 out of those 8 men I just mentioned have passed. It's so crazy to think. Furness and LaFawn died last decade. Bulldog, Neidhart died last decade, and Bulldog 2 decades ago. Vader was also last decade too. So I know it's getting too somber. That was and the funny thing about Team Canada at that time is Team Canada, there was only one Canadian on that team, that's Philip LaFawn. Everyone else, Doug Furness from Oklahoma, he's an American. Jim Neidhart's actually from Reno, Nevada. He's American too. He's not actually Canadian, just married Ellie Hart, Brett and Owen's sister. And then British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith's from London, England, or Leeds, England, depending on what time period you're watching him, where he's billed from. So basically, Goldust was no help to the team. Blackman got disqualified early on because he didn't know the rules of wrestling, apparently. So he, used some weaponry, or he got involved when he shouldn't have, or used a chair. He got eliminated early, as did Marvelous Mark Marrow, but that was just, a simple pinfall or whatever. Goldust just refused to tag it, and Vader carried the weight for that team. The biggest guy carrying the weight, and he's the team captain. Goldust refused to get in the ring. Vader finally tagged him in, then he walked out, and thus leading to the countout. And Vader got rid of the other three guys except for the British Bulldog, who was the sole survivor. So that's a Survivor Series team that was completely one-sided and an easy edge for Canada. And they were in Montreal, of course. It was the infamous night of the Montreal Screwjob, so that goes without saying. So Steve Blackman was able to further hone his gimmick. Now, Steve had a great gimmick. I found him to be a great worker in the ring with the martial artistry at his disposal. But one thing he really lacked was charisma. He was not a great promo guy. He rarely ever talked on the mic. He talked here and there, but not a whole lot. And he had a very flat affect. There was really not much tone, intuition in his voice, and not much, positive energy to speak of, for that matter, for lack of a better term. It didn't feel like you were watching somebody. He wasn't convincing enough. You weren't convinced listening to a Steve Blackman promo, and that's just, his genetic disposition, I guess. He's a bail bondsman now, and he's basically one of the chillest guys you'll ever meet. Just a quick aside, I met him, Legends of the Ring 2013 in Monroe Township, New Jersey. I asked about the Iron Circle match, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. He didn't like the concept too much, and wasn't one of his brighter spots. I didn't know what else to ask him. I should have asked about head cheese, but oh well, missed opportunity. But I met him, and I have a picture, so it's a keepsake. So as he was further honing his character, he began to put the Eskrima Filipino martial arts to use in his entrance. So he had these glow-in-the-dark Eskrima sticks that he used once he got in the ring, and then he'd twirl them around like a couple of batons, like this, whatever. And he'd come to the ring with this entrance music that's pretty iconic because of one Wrestling Bios. Big shout out to you, my friend, over in the UK. The theme song was Ground Shaker, and it went da 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 da. Now, Wrestling Bios, because he worships the ground Steve Blackman walks on, he added lyrics to it called Cold as Ice. He's as cold as ice, willing to sacrifice. He's as cold as ice, willing to sacrifice. And basically, Steve Blackman, I think the way Wrestling Bios interprets him, and I could be very wrong about this, but I kind of see it this way too. People made Chuck Norris jokes about 20 years ago, seeing him as an all-powerful deity or whatever. So he looks at Steve Blackman in that sense, and I could see that. Steve Blackman's a legit motherfucking ass kicker. That's why Steve motherfucking Blackman. So the entrance was cool, and then eventually he changed his theme song around mid to late 99 to Drums in the Night Part 3, and it just sounded like, that's basically it, drums. And it had some sort of percussion effects too. Something like that. And then it went do 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 do, very George of the Jungle-ish. Occasionally, Steve Blackman would be a tag team partner of one Ken Shamrock, though they later became rivals. I think Blackman was injured by Ken Shamrock in early 99. It was an Intercontinental title defense. Shamrock was the IC champ at the time. And the storyline was that Blackman wanted to seek revenge. So it was Sunday Night Heat at King of the Ring 1999, where Blackman took out Shamrock with his kendo sticks, and the big kendo sticks, they're wooden, and injured him right in the ribs. I don't know if it might have been a kayfabe injury, but Shamrock was legit bleeding from the mouth. And in his first round match on the actual pay-per-view against Mr. Ass, he lost by referee's decision. He was forced to forfeit the match. He was bleeding out his mouth. He's holding his rib cage. Shamrock couldn't repeat, the victory he had at King of the Ring 98. Not that that really did anything for him anyways. So that led to this feud, which is what the match I asked Blackman about, the Iron Circle match, fully loaded 1999 in the garage of the HSBC Arena in Buffalo, New York. I don't think it's HSBC Arena anymore, but I know there's still an arena in Buffalo. They go for Raw and SmackDown every now and again. So, it was basically the wrestlers in their rental cars. There's a circle full of parked cars in the parking garage, and all the wrestlers, the lower card guys like Mideon, Viscera, Acolytes, Bob Holly, Draws, Prince Albert, Chaz, you name it, too much. They were all in the parking lot banging on the hoods and honking the horns. Go get him, Steve. Go get him, Ken. Come on, bring it up, get him. It was like watching it was like watching, I don't know. It was like watching a real life brawl take place, a real life fight, if you will. And, you know, of course they're staging it. This is pro wrestling after all. Come on now. So, yeah, that match was okay, but it was a cool concept as a 10-year-old watching it. They're in a parking lot, and a parking lot brawl. I mean, it just seemed so fucking awesome back then. And I hope to never come across that in real life, you know, legitimately, because somebody can get hurt for real, and we all know that. So the next match, Ken Shamrock actually won that match. I think he was the first to escape the Iron Circle. I haven't watched that match in so long, so I need a refresher. That also led to their blow-off match at SummerSlam 99, the second ever Lion's Den match. Now, Shamrock was in that match a year prior, SummerSlam 98 against Owen Hart with Dan Severn as special guest referee. After the Owen Hart match, he takes on Steve Blackman with no guest referee, just a regular ref, at SummerSlam 99. That was at the Target Center in Minneapolis. And Shamrock won that match too, and, you know, I think he did the ankle lock, and that was it. So didn't really do anything to put over Blackman strongly, because all those wins went to Shamrock, so they kind of devalued him a little bit in this match. So that brings me to the next feud, which was kind of a silly one, but it happened, against Val Venus, and that led to their blow-off match at Unforgiven 99. It was the opener of Unforgiven 99. Val stole Steve Blackman's gym bag and replaced it with another gym bag consisting of none other than sex toys, dildos, whatever the fuck else was in there. And it was funny because Val Venus is a porn star gimmick, and I probably wouldn't have gotten the reference so much back then. I was only 10 years old. I just knew that Val, you know, was acting like a porn star. I already knew what the concept of pornography was then. I know it's pathetic. But yeah, he opens it up and sees these unusual looking sex toys, and I'm like, Jesus, what the fuck is this? And yeah, he'd be pissed off, and I probably would be too, so I can't blame Steve for feeling that way. Val thought it was funny. Eventually, Steve just kind of meandered about in the lower mid-card division until the spring of 2000. He was paired up with Al Snow in a comedic odd couple-esque tag team called Head Cheese. Al Snow's got head, Steve Blackman's the big cheese, or he tried to call him that, and obviously that didn't go over. But that's the whole point, though. When something's so cheesy and the fans were kind of in on the act, you have to have the right fan base to be in on the act for booking like this. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Kind of like Too Cool. Too Cool was only successful because it was one of those deals where the fans knew how corny and dorky they looked and acted with the outfits they were wearing, the baggy pants and the fake dreadlocks and the hat with the hole cut in the middle. It was ridiculous, but the fans knew it, and they just embraced it with open arms. As well they should for a lot of gimmicks, but I think today's audience, you know, because, you know, a lot of them are under the age of 18 and such, they might not get it. So it was a more adult-oriented audience, a smarter one, if you will. No offense to wrestling fans today, but, you know, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. If you know, you know. Anyways, yeah, Head Cheese was hilarious, and I went into a lot of detail about this one scene, this one segment, when I, a year ago, recorded Funniest Moments or whatever. You can go back and watch that video anytime. Blind date. Steve Blackman is set up on a blind date via Al Snow, and Al selects a friend of his. This is a lady from his therapy group. Your therapy group? Steve? Steve Blackman? Oh my God, it's so good to see you. And she comes up and hugs him, and then she just talks all night, man, like Pac-Man. Oh my God, and he could just tell he was not having the time of his life. And I think the date ended, he walked out, and Al took over. And they had other comedic moments too, like Al brings Steve to a nursing home, and he's to do stand-up comedy. He's like, we're just going to sign a few autographs and be out of here in 30 minutes, right? Not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? Ladies and gentlemen, here to perform his stand-up comedy, please enjoy the comedic stylings of Mr. Steve Blackman. Boo! The residents actually said that. Now, I work in a nursing home as a recreational therapist, so I could relate to, you know, this segment many years later. This aired in like the spring of 2000. Here we are talking about it 26 years later. So Steve Blackman makes some jokes that Al wrote, which don't go over very well naturally, until he gets to a joke, your mama joke, and it offended this one resident. Who's like, my mother died back in 1964. How dare you speak of her like that? Shame on you. You want to fight, Blackman? And she's in her wheelchair. She's putting her fists up. And, you know, I'm glad we didn't have the state involved in that one. You know, obviously it was a segment and she was just an actress. But they cut the camera, and then they acted like he actually beat her up with nunchucks or something. Steve, you can't do that, Al says. You can't put your hands on the elderly like that. And then the police sirens are coming. Ooh. and they get in the car and go. Great stuff. And one more, I think they milked a cow, and Steve got his nunchucks after he couldn't milk him right, and well, he tried to. That was what we were led to believe, but it's all sound effects and stuff, so he didn't really actually harm anybody. WWF pushed the envelope there. It was the Attitude Era, so that's why they did what they did. So eventually he got sick and tired of being with Al Snow and Head Cheese, I think, when Harvey Whippleman came out as the Easter Bunny on a Easter Sunday episode of Sunday Night Heat, a special edition. That was the breaking point. He's like, we're done. I don't have time for this crap. So then he turns his attention to the Hardcore division, captures the Hardcore Championship in June of 2000 from Crash Holly. And while he was champion, it seemed like they put a hold on the 24/7 rule. It didn't seem like people were actually competing for the belt as much. Blackman would end up becoming a 6-time Hardcore champion. That was the only bit of championship gold he held. He should have been at least a European champion. If not an Intercontinental champion, that might have been a bit of a stretch, but definitely European champion, but or tag team champion too with somebody, with Al Snow, short Phantom run. But anyways, yeah, 6-time Hardcore champion. His most memorable match comes at SummerSlam 2000 against Shane McMahon. Shane climbs the scaffolding. Blackman with the kendo stick hits him in the back. Shane falls. Oh my God! Falls like a good 20 feet from the scaffolding. Or 15 feet maybe. I don't know. It's pretty bad. 15, 20 feet, but no higher than that. Blackman jumps, about 10 feet from the ground, does a leg drop, and then pins him to win the belt. But Shane McMahon would do such daredevilish things, and that's well documented. So I'm going to stop right there. Excuse me, pardon me. One match that's a little bit underrated, and it's kind of flown under the radar because it was on a pay-per-view that a lot of people didn't like particularly because of how the booking started to change in the fall of 2000 with the end of the Attitude Era, or getting close to it anyways, because that's when Stephanie McMahon took over creative control from Chris Kresge, who I think had stepped down from, head of creative at the time for the World Wrestling Federation. And that match I'm talking about is from Unforgiven 2000. It was a 10-minute Hardcore Championship Battle Royal. It was basically a scramble. It was like what they did at WrestleMania 2000, except that had more competitors, and it lasted 15 minutes. This time they only get 10 minutes. And whoever is the Hardcore Champion at the end of the 10 minutes is the official champion. And those are actual recognized reigns. Steve Blackman successfully defended against Crash Holly, Al Snow, Funaki, Test, and Perry Saturn. So that's 5 former Hardcore champions. Only former Hardcore champions were eligible to enter this match, mind you. So Crash wins it at first. He holds it for a cup of coffee. Then Perry Saturn holds it for a good 5-6 minutes. Last 3 minutes, Blackman gets it back, and then everyone bludgeons him, and the time expires, and Blackman's the champion at the end of the bout. So it's kind of an uneventful match, but I felt like there was something to it just because it seemed like they were trying to keep the 24/7 thing going, but maybe they're deciding, okay, maybe it's run its course, so they decided to put an end to it. And then, of course, the 24/7 championship, which was based off of the Hardcore title, would be resurrected in 2019, and it seemed like ad nauseum between 2019 and 2022 when people were constantly vying for that belt, even celebrities and non-wrestlers, and it just got ridiculous. I'm glad they abandoned the whole concept because, it'll wear out, and I guess they didn't want it to wear out too thin, and they didn't want the 24/7 rule for the Hardcore belt to wear out its welcome too thin, so that's why they kind of had this little match to test out and see, okay, what's the popularity of it? Should we keep on going with this concept? And I guess the decision was no. Kind of a no-brainer there. So he then feuded with guys like Hardcore Holly and Raven over the belt. Raven actually beat him on Christmas Day of 2000. It was a Raw that was taped a couple days prior and then aired on Christmas Day on the year 2000. So he was out of the Hardcore division after that and teamed with Grandmaster Sexay in the spring of 2001. Scotty 2 Hotty had a legit ankle injury and needed to be written off TV, so they had Kurt Angle give him an ankle lock and severely injure it, and he sold it like a champ, Scotty did. So Grandmaster Sexay needed a tag team partner because Too Cool was pretty much done here. So he decided to recruit the likes of one, Steve motherfucking Blackman. WrestleMania 17 Sunday Night Heat, they took on the newly formed X Factor, X-Pac and Just Incredible with Albert in their corner. Now, it was Sunday Night Heat, so this is technically a dark match. So Sexay says to him, and they're talking backstage in the Astrodome, here, you got to put these shades on. Hey, my feet are not for dancing. They're for ass kicking. He was serious about that, but he tried to dance a little, and, it wasn't as extreme as Head Cheese in terms of trying to get Blackman to come out of his shell, and I get they were trying to do it with Grandmaster Sexay, but that didn't last too long. It was more low-key. Sexay was struggling with drug abuse, as he did for a long time, and that, unfortunately, those habits led to his untimely death. This is Brian Christopher Lawler we're talking about. And so, yeah, it was a short-lived tag team, and they lost to X-Pac and Just Incredible, X Factor, Sunday Night Heat, WrestleMania 17. They lost that match after all that little build-up. But then Sexay was let go. He was released in late May of 2001. And, yeah, I think he was transporting narcotics or something across the border, American-Canadian border. So he was actually caught, and so they let him go right then and there. Jerry Lawler wasn't there to protect his son, so Brian Christopher was, not safe anymore in the company as long as his dad wasn't employed. So Steve Blackman then left during the invasion angle. You didn't see him at all, actually, so it wasn't much he did. And like I said, he now works as a bail bondsman in central Pennsylvania. I don't think he's still living in Annville, but he does a lot of shoot interviews. And he talks about dealing with guys in the back that were a little bit difficult, like Bob Holly and Bradshaw. I always joke in my mind, you put those three in a room together, shit's going to go down. Bradshaw was a bully. Bob Holly has been called a bully too. Steve Blackman, not so much, but I feel like he would have stood up for people who were being, harassed by Bradshaw or Holly. So he seems like a good guy. And he is, because I met him in real life. So I wish he was given a I wish he had better accolades than just a 6-time hardcore champion. While there's nothing wrong with that, he deserved better. Like I said, a European title or tag title run. Or they could have put him in somewhat of a, semi-main event rub, which I think they did. King of the Ring 99, the tag match main event with Vince and Shane against Austin. Shane was taken out at first, but then Commissioner Michaels decided he was faking an injury, and they were going to replace him with Steve Blackman, Steve versus Steve. But, of course, that didn't happen, so I wish they'd done more in that sense, because he was a legit badass, and he should have been used better. But that's just one man's opinion, as it always is in these videos. This has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I'm your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.